Hey, good afternoon, everybody on LinkedIn and on YouTube, actually. Welcome to another episode of Automation Ladies live demo. Today we have Software Toolbox, and we've got Nicole and Jessica, and they will
Hey.
be showing you some stuff after they tell you a little bit about themselves. And then this episode is brought to you by SPS, which will be in Atlanta, and we will be there. Me and Nikki will be there. Actually, maybe Courtney will be there too. I'm trying to remember. But we will both be giving talks about different things at SPS. This is in Atlanta in September. So without further ado, I don't know if Nicole or Jessica wanted to start, but could you guys please give us a little introduction to yourselves before we talk about, what Software Toolbox is, and then you guys show us kind of what it's all about?
Yeah, I can start. So my name's Jessica. I've been at Software Toolbox for a little over 4 years at this point. I'm originally from California, so California girl living in the South. That's working out great. But right before I went to college, I was in the military for 10 years. So I served on the Ronald Reagan. And then when I got out, I was like, I'm ready to use this GI Bill and get some free college. And went to school and got my degree in computer engineering. And I ended up at Software Toolbox because John Weber, the owner of our company, actually came and spoke at my school. And he made this company sound super, super cool, which it is. And you're going to learn that today. And so I reached out to him on it was during COVID. So I had to, go on an online career fair and request to speak to him. But from there, just very quickly interviews. And here I am. And I've been here for about 4 years. And what I do here is I'm on the solutions team. So what the solutions team does is pretty much the pre-sales part of the project lifecycle. So people call in if they're trying to find that puzzle piece for their project, right? So I got to, communicate with X, need to get it to Y, and our team helps them figure out what that solution is and how to implement it, and potentially assist with a little bit of services. So
You said military. Were you in the Navy? Did you mention
yeah,
which branch? Because you
yeah,
said you
yeah.
were. It sounded like you were on a ship, so I was like, okay, Navy.
Yeah. Sorry, I was in the Navy. Yeah, good key context clues there. I was on the Ronald Reagan, so I deployed. If anybody remembers Fukushima, the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, we were the first responders over there.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Right on. How about you, Nicole?
Yeah, I'm Nicole. I am on the support team for at Software Toolbox. So a lot of post-sales assistance if things go down for people or if they just have questions about the products that they're working with that we provide. I also graduated with a degree in computer engineering. I went to NC State. We're located in North Carolina, and I've been in North Carolina for quite a while. Was born in Oregon, so coast to coast, but I consider North Carolina home. Um, I really like art, and I love learning. So just anything that can engage the mind is really my bread and butter.
How did you get into? How did you choose computer engineering?
I have always been interested in the sciences. Just growing up, I really enjoyed physics, and I thought I was going to do physics for the longest time. But learning more about like computers and engineering and things, I had realized that computers were kind of the one thing that were the most foreign to me. There wasn't really like any computer programs in my school, so it just, the concept of a black box is kind of understood, but it very much felt like a black box in terms of knowledge. Like I had an idea of how you'd approach anything else except computers. So I was like, I need to do that. I can't go not knowing it.
So you went for the hardest thing that you could think of. Awesome. Very cool.
Yes, I
I'm just like that
I
myself.
Ambitious.
get bored quickly if I'm not like engaged in something that I'm banging my head against the wall. So
Right.
Right
Yeah.
on. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Oh no, I was just gonna say originally I was actually a mechanic in the military, so it didn't directly translate over. And when I went to school, I started as a mechanical engineer. But in Charlotte, we're like the NASCAR capital of the world, and so it was like every little boy's dream to work for NASCAR. and become a mechanical engineer. And I was like, that's not for me. So I ended up, switching over to computer engineering, which I love much better. So.
Do you guys prefer like the hardware side or the software side? I know the answer, but I'm just asking the question anyway.
Personally or the company?
Personally, just personally.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell the story that I went to Atlanta right before I graduated, and I went to the Coca-Cola museum there, and they have a factory part where you can see the machines moving and things like that, right? Making the bottles, capping them, packaging them, and I thought to myself that I love everything about that, and so I love the machinery side, and I think that comes from my mechanic background, but I really love where the machine meets the software, and figuring out how to tell that machine what to do and to automate something, and make everything, work, without having to go in, pick the bottle up, put the bottle in the package yourself, right? So for me, it's kind of right there at the edge with the machine and the software.
Right on. We got Michael Cox saying, "Thank you for your service, Jessica."
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And then we have another. It doesn't say who it is, but shout out to Charlotte.
Woo!
And then Devin thinks that it's like you guys building really insane calculators. Do you agree with that? Or would you say that's oversimplifying it? He's a chemical engineer for reference.
So it's the first thing you do in Introduction to Engineering. At least the first thing I did. I don't know about you, Nicole.
I think you can really like effectively think of computers as a architecture of like calculators on calculators on calculators based off of the specific context that you're in. So yeah,
Okay.
I'd say that's a good analogy.
Okay. I've never heard that one, but now I learned something. Let's see. Okay. So let's get into what Software Toolbox is. Which one of you wants to kind of introduce the company? Okay, Jessica.
Yeah, that's going to be me. So Software Toolbox, first of all, I'm super happy to be representing Software Toolbox today. I love doing things like this. I love going to events. And so thank you so much for having us on your podcast. But Software Toolbox has been around nearly 30 years. And I say nearly because next year is our 30-year anniversary. So round of applause for us. Look out for any excitement on that next year. But ultimately, what we do is we help our customers integrate and transform data across the entire automation pyramid. So whether that's OT, IT, ET, SAP, ERP, cloud, you name it, we move data. I like to call ourselves data plumbers, right? So if you think about plumbing, water just moves through plumbing, and we provide that plumbing for our customers. So since 1966, global customers, large and small, has been reaching out to us. So we do business all around the world in over 100 countries.
Wow.
And so our owner, John Weber, he started this company with three main goals in mind. One is offering a diverse portfolio of solutions, providing expertise to that industry, and then backing up all of that expertise and the diverse solutions with competent support. So if you know anything about us, or you've seen our blogs or been on our website, you'll see that we actually have a 97% CSAT score. So anybody in the industry that knows Software Toolbox, they know that we answer and we know what we're talking about. And if we don't know what we're talking about, we're definitely not going to leave you hanging. And we treat every project as we know they're all different, right? So we make no assumptions, and we make sure that we have those meaningful conversations so that we're meeting your specific needs, right? And the one thing that makes our team super special is that the majority of us started on support, right? I started on support, Nicole's on support, almost this entire solutions team started on support or spent time on support, right? And so what that does is we get that hands-on expertise of troubleshooting and figuring out problems, and that increases our ability to help our customers. So that's what we do. That's Software Toolbox.
Who started the company?
Our company owner, John Weber.
Okay, I met him at Prove It conference.
You did, yeah.
He was putting on hard hats and then showing I think it was a Modbus controller that would shut off the production line if a camera could not see a human with a hard hat on.
Yeah,
that was cool.
Yeah, so actually we were using we're not showing this software today, but yeah, there was a camera and you wore a hard hat, and we used OPC Router to empower Google AI to define whether somebody was within safety standards or not.
Oh, we got John Weber actually in the comments saying that he started in support in 1990. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, and he believes in that, right? Allowing people who start on this team, getting that hands-on support and getting that experience, getting close up and personal, and having to figure out this software. So,
I
Nicole,
really like
I don't
that.
if you want to speak to your support expertise there.
Yeah, I think just having support be at the heart of what we do makes it very evident to external sources that we are prioritizing their experience moving through their engagement with our software, our work with them. It's not just a sale and done, right? Like there's always things that we're here to help with, to build on, to engage with. And I think that also really drives us as well and our interests in the business, right? So a lot of us have external roles outside of our primary position. So I'm on the support team. I also do a lot of work in internal systems. So coding for our websites, trying to manage like our databases for our like licensing, things like that. And that feeds back into my understanding of the software that we work with and how I can help customers. And with everyone having their different interests and building on them outside of the support role, you have people really start to blossom into specific specialties that they become very good at. And you know who to go to if you need to ask for some like bouncing off of ideas, or if you're just looking for an external source of information on something that you know somebody else is particularly good at. It really makes us a very dynamic team, and it's really cool to work with so many talented people as well.
How many people work for Software Toolbox?
I think we still under 20, something
No,
around that.
I think yeah, we're at 20, 21, 22, something around there.
Okay, and then you guys are based in Charlotte, or you're in South Carolina?
So the
North
majority, yeah, that's all right. We're right on the border. So the majority of our, yeah, I actually live in South Carolina, so it's not that far away.
Okay, funny. Okay, good.
Yeah. So the majority of our team is actually based in Charlotte. So you'll find the goal, like the bulk of us here. We do have a couple of remote workers that are on our marketing team and things like that. And that's another thing that's great about Software Toolbox is we work hybrid at Software Toolbox too. So Mondays and Fridays. Of course, we'll come in the office if we need to. But John Weber, there we go, 21. 21. That's how many people are here. But yeah, so it's a really relaxed, great team. Like Nicole said, such a technical and knowledgeable team. I've learned so much in the last 4 years, and I learn literally every single day. Being a Gemini, I get if you believe in that kind of stuff, I get a little bored pretty quickly, and that does not happen here. So
excellent. So you guys are going to show us the OPC router. Is that, the main product? Is that the first product? Like, are there other products? Like, can you explain, what the products are?
yeah, so we have a large portfolio of products. Our flagship product is actually Top Server. So if you're familiar with Kep Server, Top Server is a white label version of Kep Server, and that is what we call the flagship product. So it is an OPC server that has over 100 drivers that communicates to PLCs across the industry. And then of course it supports OPC, UA, DA, SweetLink, FastCDE, things like that for client connectivity. But beyond that, we have another OPC server called Omni Server, which is what we use for those end of the line devices. These are those devices that don't have a like specific protocol that's widely available, like Modbus or Allen Bradley, right? So with Omni Server, I always want to tell people if you have those devices that have the proprietary protocols, so we see it a lot in food and beverage or pharmaceuticals, right? Pharmaceuticals, it's a big one because as you can imagine, you don't want a widely known protocol where somebody can just hack into it, right? So most of the devices in the pharmaceutical industry have proprietary ones. And what OmniServer can do is you can build out that protocol and choose a mode of communication, link those two things together, and then get that data into Ignition, Aviva, wherever you need
That
the
is really
cloud, MQTT, and stuff like that. Nicole, do you want to name a couple of others that we have?
Yeah, so OPC Router is one of the products that's kind of really starting to grow as it's being really actively developed in terms of features that we'll get into a bit later. Adjacent to that, we also have other products that kind of sit higher on the automation layers, such as Data Hub, which has a bunch of features that can connect like OPC to MQTT to databases. It also has historian access for like many different types of historians. It has some scripting capabilities, and there's many different components to all of our products that we specialize in understanding what best fits specific scenario. So a lot of times people will come to us and say, hey, this is my project. What would make sense to talk, get these two things to talk? And that's where Jessica becomes a very powerful tool. And she will jump in and kind of walk through and explore the situation with them. Other products we have are OPC Data Logger, which gets OPC DA or OPC UA tags and writes them to a file. And we have a remote config tool which connects to top server or KEP server and allows you to remotely manage many different instances of your deployment of top server, KEP server from a separate machine. So you can have different users access those configurations, make changes, look at the logs, and also it keeps like an audit log for future review, things like that. Many different things that can become useful for many different implementations. It's just a matter of getting in with the customer and seeing what works best for them.
Yeah, and just to add for the data logger, it will log to files, but it'll also log to databases as well.
Yes.
So it's a an affordable tool for those people who, those smaller customers, right, who need something to get something into their either the local database or, maybe they could only afford the cloud or whatever, right? So it's an affordable tool that will get that OPC data and can put it, in a database.
Yeah, often there's a bit of overlap between some of the solutions we provide, and it's just a matter of evaluating which one is most effective for whichever implementation someone's looking for. And that's where the knowledge across the board becomes very helpful.
So I learned about you guys at Prove It conference, and Prove It conference is like specifically about using unified namespace. So is there some products that like are really good like in Software Toolbox to like try to create? Because I know it's an architecture. It's not just like, it's not a product. Like there's a lot of players in the unified namespace. Do you have some comments on that?
Yeah, so at Prove It, we used a few of our solutions, right? So we used Top Server, OmniServer, which communicated to that board that was showing whether or not you had a hard hat on or not, right? We utilized Data Hub, which communicated to that camera and pushed data to their UNS, which was an MQTT broker, right? So Data Hub itself can also be a broker. Now, we don't market ourselves as people as UNS software, providers. However, you can if you're looking for a small UNS solution. But if you're looking for enterprise level or something like that, we would be more people to provide that data to the UNS to help empower that UNS in your system.
I think the aggregation aspect is where we really play with the UNS ideas, getting data from many different sources at the floor level, and then combining it into a single space in the software, and then providing it to higher layers, like the IT layer, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out all of this like UNS stuff, and I'm a PLC programmer that knows a little bit of like SCADA. So that's where, I have a very limited understanding of like the software side. And, I started learning about servers and, databases and historians, and it's so much IT stuff that it just like blows my mind. And so that's why I ask, these like low level questions, just because, or I guess high level, like big picture questions, because I actually don't know. And like, that's why I went to Prove It, to kind of try to learn what some of this stuff was about. Looks like John Weber says, ironically, today's technical blog post we did, was about UNS, or how to help UNS, demonstrated at Prove It. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. That went out at 2:00, and you'll learn where you can subscribe to the blog today.
I'll ask you that at the very end of this. So I guess without further ado, let's talk about let's watch your demo.
Yeah. So first, I'm going to share my screen first, and we need to define OPC router before we just kind of jump into it, right?
Okay.
Give like a good understanding of what you're looking at here. So give me 1 second. It's making me choose that screen again. There we go. Can you see my screen yet?
Still seeing purple.
Allow. How about now?
There we go.
There it is.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and just get this started here. So I'd like to introduce you to OPC Router before Nicole walks you through its powerful features. So at its core, you can think of OPC Router as a middleware. Ultimately, if you don't know what a middleware is, you can think of that as a universal translator in your systems, right? So it helps all the different pieces in your environment communicate together. So PLCs, HMIs, databases, SAP systems, clouds, things like that. OPC Router can communicate to that. So we often think about, if you think about a manufacturing environment, we see data silos quite often. And we've done a couple webinars and blogs on this about how we aim to remove those silos and get everything communicating, right? So we don't want those disconnected systems of machines or PLCs. And so OPC Router steps in to bring all of that together. So ultimately, when you use OPC Router, you would want this to move real-time data and in turn empower yourself to automate tasks, visualize what you need across your entire system. And if you're aiming towards improving your systems to reach the industry 4.0 standards, this is the kind of tool that's going to make that real, right? It's going to help our users tie everything together to make one smart system. Additionally, OPC Router offers flexible, scalable deployment options. So whether you like that traditional client-server setup or you want to containerize into a Docker container, OPC Router can support that. And it is platform independent, so it can run on Windows, Linux, or even ARM-based devices, which makes it easy to scale across diverse environment. And we're going to talk about scaling during the demo. About horizontal and vertical scaling and how OPC Router is going to help you with that. So the next thing is I just kind of want to give you a visual of our demo here. So I drew up this architecture, and we just want to show how easy it is you can build everything in OPC Router with a simple drag and drop workflow. And what that means for you is you don't have to write a single line of code. There's no custom scripts or anything like that. And this is available to you through OPC Router through plugins. And what plugins are is you can think of them as connections. So anything that requires like an endpoint or an IP address or maybe a domain or something, that's what you would configure in a plugin. And then what Nicole's going to show you is that we have connections, right? And connections is where you drag and drop these plugins and tell them how to communicate. And so what you're looking at on the screen here is that we put a few real world scenarios. These are things that I personally have helped customers with, Nicole has as well, and our entire team, right? So this is out in the industry. People are doing this kind of stuff. So here you can see that we're using top server, but we're communicating to an OPC server. This could be an embedded OPC server in a PLC as well, or KEF server, or anything else. It doesn't have to be top server, but today we're going to communicate to an OPC server, and we're going to take that real-time PLC data and write it to a CSV file. Then we're going to read out of that CSV file and place all that data into a database. We're going to take things a step further, and we're going to query that database and provide that information to 3 different destinations. One of them is going to be a third-party REST client, which means OPC Router is going to act as a REST server or a REST API. Then the second one is going to be a REST server, which means OPC Router is going to act as that REST client. And then lastly, we're going to, talking about UNS, right? We're going to publish to an MQTT broker, which means we're going to act as an MQTT client. And I just want to be clear that you can switch out any of these sources with a source, whether you need it to go from the broker to a database or vice versa, right? So today we're going kind of unilaterally with our data, but the data can flow bidirectionally. And again, we're showing you a few features that we've seen, like common features that we've seen in the industry, but OPC Router can do much, much more than this. So if you are thinking about a project at the end of this, make sure you reach out and say, hey, do you guys support this feature, right? And just don't think that this demo is all OPC Router can do. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. And Nicole, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm sharing my screen, and Nicole's going to walk you through the demo, and she's going to show you exactly how this works and how easy it is. Are you ready, Nicole?
Yes. Let's see if I can get this up and going.
I like the explanation where you're just like, make sure that you don't think that this is the only thing it can do. Like, please reach out and ask us, like, challenge us, and make sure that we can't do something because we probably can.
Well, and like I mentioned, right, like it does SAP, ERP, cloud-based things, right? These are not things that we're necessarily showing today, but just reach out if you have a question.
All right. You can see my screen now. Everything look good here?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Yep. Okay. So just to get us started, I just wanted to walk through kind of the initial setup of the software, like basically where you would be starting if you were a new user. So OPC Router installs with 3 services, including a web management interface. So the way you would access the configuration is through a URL. So here you can see right now it's hooked to localhost and then the port 5000. So you can also set it up to use like HTTPS for high levels of security, but right now we've just got an HTTP connection here. If you don't go there, if you want, there's a nifty feature in Edge where you can create like a little separate application for this web management interface, which I've done here, and it's just got a nice little OPC Router icon for it, which I like. But yeah, so this is where you kind of start. There's a list of tabs on the side here, and a menu that's context specific to the tab, and we'll start to go into those later. Central, you have your main workspace, so whatever information you're looking at, this is what's going to be relevant from your context menu. On the right, you have your transfer objects, which it relates to the configuration of the data flows between your plugin components that Jessica was referencing, and we'll come back to these later as well. Other relevant information is going to be your high level stuff. So up at the top, it has information on redundancy because it's going to be pretty important if you have redundancy configured. You want to know the status of it. And then your runtime, which dictates that data is flowing with OPC Router. So if your runtime is stopped, it's not moving information. So that's kind of our basic interface navigation. So at this point, we can start to look into the specific tabs that we have. This is our home page. It has a lot of your project management details, so importing and exporting projects, licensing, and it has some configurations of high-level enterprise features, as well as like settings for your particular project. Just very general things that aren't specific to the way data is moving in OPC Router. Our second tab is going to be your plugins. So these are your connection points to external nodes. This is kind of the best reference, I think, for a lot of the ways that you can use OPC Router. This is where you can get data in and move data out. As you can see, there's quite a few plugins here. There's a lot of different ways you can get data moving. We're only going to use a couple of these today, but let us know if there's something that particularly interests you, and we can certainly expand on it. Right now, we're going to be focusing on a few of the components that Jessica outlined in that architecture drawing, and we'll come back to look at the specific configuration of this. The next component that we'll be looking at after that is connections, which is the visual workspace. This is what makes OPC Router pretty intuitive in a lot of ways, is you have this flow of data that you can visually drag and drop components. It's where your transfer objects are utilized. You'll create connections. So you can create folders and connections. You have many set up in a single project, or you can just have a small isolated project that has only a few things loaded. It just depends on what kind of solution that you're looking for. So you can license the different plugins that you might need to use and only configure the relevant components. And that will determine the size of your project, is the number of data flows that you have set up in here. This would be your vertical scaling aspect. So everything in here is going to be different logic components that operate at different times, but they operate as simultaneously as possible within the single instance. After this, you have your templates. So templates are ways that you can automate your connection building. If you're using similar logic between different connections, maybe you have something like an MQTT broker, and you want to publish to a few different topics that are similar in name, or even just you have a OPC UA connection and you want to separate the logic between different groups of tags, but they all follow the same path. It's just different groups of tags and need something specific in how they're being referenced. This is how you can do that. And this makes the vertical scalability very simple. And it's a powerful way to create larger projects without having to go in and repeat the same logic over and over again. We'll talk about this again a little bit later, but if there is particular need for horizontal scaling, that's something that you can do between OPC Router instances. Typically, you wouldn't necessarily need that from a performance perspective. We've seen OPC Router do a lot of powerful things in terms of being able to move a lot of data, being able to manage a lot of connections. It's not something that's particularly a concern from that aspect, but a lot of times if you're operating on many different sites, it makes more sense to separate OPC Router instances per site and scale that way. So this can also be a good use of templates, is you create a template for each site, and then you can create projects that use the template differently because things have different names there. But that would just be a template variable that you would implement. And when you're ready to deploy a new site, you can just define those template variables at that point and create the connections that way. Okay, so after that, we have our Publish tab. Anything above this is all going to be local configuration. So this only exists within the project that you're defining. No data is flowing when you set up anything in these tabs. Once you want to make something run on the runtime service, you use the Publish tab. This is where you would say, I want this information to start operating in production, and I want the logic that I specifically referenced to be used in the actual OPC router runtime instance. So you can pick the specific components that you're looking to publish, which means you can make changes while it's still running in the background, and you don't have to worry about that affecting the runtime until you're ready to publish those changes. After that, you have your configuration component specifically. You're able to publish components to the runtime. Now we want to look at what's necessarily on the runtime at the moment. That's where you use your state tab. This will show you exactly what's running in OPC Router. So right now I have published just the connection to the plugins, not the connections, the plugins that we're using here. So these are the plugins that I'm specifically going to be using today. None of the connections currently are published, so it shows you that nothing's really moving. I can make a connection to a broker, but no data is moving to the broker because I don't have any logic deployed that would perform those actions. That's kind of the high-level overview of that aspect of configuration. So now I think we're ready to get into our actual playing with the product. So the first thing that we would probably want to do, and that I like to do when I'm starting a new project, is define a problem statement. It just helps determine the scope of a high-level project and then even smaller aspects of the project that you might want to break off into chunks. So my problem statement that I'm starting with today is this one that I have here. I've created this base connection with nothing configured in it except my problem statement. And it's going to be the first thing that we're doing. So right now, let's start by creating a connection that takes a Boolean tag from an OPC UA server, monitors it for when it goes high, and uses that to write tags to a CSV. That's going to be the logic that we're trying to implement here. The way we would start going about that is to figure out what our inputs and outputs are, and that would help us know what plugins we might need to use. So for this case, it's going to be the OPC UA server, which means OPC Router is acting as the OPC UA client. And then the other endpoint is going to be our CSV file. That's just the local directory, so we don't really need to define anything there. So let's just start with our UA server connection. That's set up in our plugins. So here we can see I have an OPC UA client here. And this is just a connection to a local top server, which is defined on this machine, and it's connected to a ControlLogix PLC. So we're going to be getting data from ControlLogix PLCs, looking for the tag to go high, and then using that as our trigger to write to a CSV. We can see here that our plugin connection has quite a few different options for how we can define the connectivity. One of the good things about OPC Router is that the developer is a Kepware partner, which means top server as a white labeled KEP server plays really nicely with it. So a lot of these straight default components will work pretty nicely to play with top server. And then you have really granular control of other aspects of the connection as well. So you can make it play nicely with a lot of other OPC UA servers. So right now we can just see here that if I check the connection, I can verify that I'm able to speak to the server, and this is without having to publish anything to the runtime. So this is a nice check step that we can actually use to make sure that you're able to quickly get started and get rolling with trying to configure something. So now that we have this set up, I just want to point out while we're here, that a lot of the other plugins have similar configuration aspects, right? There's just certain parameters that you'll need to specify to talk to these external sources. So like MQTT, it's got a pretty similar setup in terms of how you might look at the plugin configuration here. So you just have the certain aspects that you need to define. In this case, I'm talking to a little HiveMQ instance that I have set up. All your aspects of configuration are going to be specific to the protocol that you're looking to communicate over. So for MQTT, you have your client ID, you have the broker endpoint. This can be just a local machine instance or something like a web service that you're accessing, and the specific protocol. So this supports several different protocol versions of MQTT, as well as different cloud profiles. So like if you need to connect to AWS, Azure IoT, those are options for you. So here we can check this connection as well and verify that it's working. And from here, I will go ahead and start to work on the configuration. This is the fun part. It's what makes me love my job. I get to play with OPC Router every day. So let's get started. Our first aspect is that we need to get data from the OPC UA server. So the way we would do that is to access the server through a transfer object. The transfer objects are basically local nodes of operation, you can think of them as. So some logic is executed within the transfer object, and then you create connections between transfer object to define a flow of data. So it'll get data in one transfer object, some operation will be performed, and it'll move to the next one until the entire connection is complete. So for OPC UA, we'll want to use the data access transfer object. You see we have a large list of transfer objects here. Thankfully, there's a filter up here, so we can try our OPC transfer objects. And here we have data access. So every transfer object has its own configuration interface, depending on the specific aspects that it needs to define for that operation to occur within it. So for this one, we'll want to pick the plugin that we're specifically interested in. So that will be our connection to top server that we defined earlier. We'll also need to choose the tags that we want to access from this connection. So we can do that with the tag browser. And this just shows all of the tags that it's able to retrieve from top server. These are tags defined within the top server namespace. If you're familiar with top server or kept server, they're static tags. So let's drill down and grab a couple of tags in here. I would like to get them from control logics. I have set up here. And I'm going to be grabbing some accumulator tags from our counters and timers. Just to make this readable, I'll go ahead and give these a simple name that's understandable as they're separate items. Okay, so we have our tags. Say okay. And now this is a node where we read these items from the server. What we need to do with them is write them to a file. So the way we would go about that is to first define the file that we're writing to. So the way we can find that here is in a file write object. I'm going to write this, and I have this path predefined here, so let me grab it for simplicity. But you can browse your computer and find the file on the local machine. I'm just going to paste it in here for ease. We'll call this file control logics data. And I want to append to the file. So as we read new items from the server, we're going to keep adding them to the CSV file. So say OK there. The next issue that we have is how we're formatting the file. We have our source, we have our destination. So let's start to get this data in the format we need to get it into a file. There's a couple of ETL tools that OPC Router comes with, and ETL being extract, transform, load. It's just a concept that talks about how we're manipulating information in different ways to format it in what makes sense. So, or what makes sense for the destination.
Hey,
so
Nicole,
here,
real quick. So for the details on this, we do have blogs and things like that. I'm just looking for the interest of time. I want us to make sure we can go through all of the connections.
Yes.
So we can just kind of place that trigger and briefly describe what it's doing, and then go from there. Does that work for you?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Okay. So using the CSV object, we can move this data between the two. It is our connector between our source and destination for transforming the data into the format for the file. So here we can access this information and see what exactly we need to format that. So I want for decimal items, we'll want them as a decimal point. Comma would be for, I think, European format. Our separator is going to be a comma. And I believe we probably want to do no headers and just start with our data items. So at this point, we should be good to go. So I'm going to start adding the items that we're going to be writing, plus a timestamp so we know when that is written to the file for that specific record. So let me grab these.
And while she does that, these are going to correlate with the OPC tags that are coming out of the OPC server directly, right? And so she's giving them a place for those values to live in the Excel file.
Yep, this is our converter between just data, just numbers coming from a PLC through top server to an actual file format with defined information for where each item lives. So these are just references that we're using. They could be headers should you need them, but in this case, we're not using them as headers. So at this point, we can start connecting things. There's
and
a very
is the beauty
cool
of OPC Router.
this is always fun. It feels like magic. So here, if we can we? Maybe we can't. Yes, we can. So we can use OPC Router itself to create a logical connection between the names of our tags and then their destinations in the CSV file. So it should be able to determine which counter goes to which counter in CSV file. So let's get this connected up here. and it resolves those names for us. Let's go ahead and add a timestamp item. There's some default variables that you can use. So I will use one of these to define our system time. We'll just pass it in as a string. And then timestamp. And then output our entire document to the file. Okay. So if we make this productive, we can see, and you can make it productive down here. This will just deploy the single connection itself. So if you're doing many connections, you can just click this make changes productive, just so we're all on the same page. These are the same operations. I can trigger this connection and show, if I hit yes, data flowing to a CSV file. Once I have that set up, now I need logic to actually have this go when the bit goes high in my specific tag. So to do that, just do a trigger item. So I can use a trigger to connect back to my top server instance. I'll pick a specific data point. I have this defined here, so let me grab that for you. And we can copy it over. I only want this to trigger once when the bit goes high instead of trigger continuously. So we'll wait for the falling edge for when it goes from high to low for it to look for the next trigger. And with that, we should be able to republish and add just the bit trigger. Everything else is not changing, but we can see it now automatically starts producing new file writes whenever the logic of the trigger is executed or it becomes true. So you can put multiple triggers in a project and use different logic, so and or logic, if you want both to be true or just one or the other to be true. And you can map many different transfer objects into a single connection for that logic to occur and make things happen in different modular ways. So that's kind of what we're going to move into next. So I just want to show a couple of other examples of things that you can do here. Like Jessica said, we have many different ways of moving data. So this is just going to provide that logic for you, just in case you want some examples of things that can happen. So first we have reading from a database table to an MQTT broker. So when we're getting these values from a table, we're compiling them into a JSON payload and then moving that payload to the broker to be published. So this can have many different implementations for many different projects. We might see a lot of ways that people use it with Data Hub, since we provide Data Hub, or HiveMQ, Mosquito, Ranger. Just a couple of examples there.
Yeah, and just to kind of jump in here, and so with the fourth industrial revolution that we all know is here, right? It came MQTT, right? And so on our end, or on the solutions team end, we're seeing a lot of people coming with IoT devices, right? And those IoT devices need to ultimately publish or send data to a broker, right? So OPC Router would be a fantastic solution for that. Today, you're seeing Nicole's using the MQTT client plugin, right, to publish to this third-party broker, which, again, we were talking about UNS earlier, right? This could be your UNS, right? And you saw that, as we mentioned, the same type of demonstration at Prove It, where we used OPC Router to publish that Google AI camera stuff to a UNS. And so this allows also downstream clients to connect to that UNS and consume this data that's coming either from the shop floor or from your ERP system or wherever, right? So you can go ahead
Yeah.
to the next connection there.
Yeah. So the next two examples we can kind of group together as both are REST oriented. So the first one is to a REST client, so OPC Router acting as a REST server. In this case, we are just getting the same database item that we're using to grab components. In this case, I'm just looking for a specific transferred column to be one, which indicates that the transfer did occur. So this is process data. We're looking to retrieve process data for some client that's requesting that information. And we just send the 10 most recent items based off of this database select. And we can, in this item, define a sorting order so we can only look for the most recent items by timestamp. And we're returning 10 of the most recent timestamped items. That's what's getting packaged into a JSON payload and provided to a REST client. Our other implementation here is to act as a REST client ourselves. So we're pushing data to a REST API. This could be something like a MES system. I know that's a bit redundant, or an ERP. Canary has a REST interface, and Aviva Connect. We've demonstrated these types of connections before in other tutorials that we have available on our website. And we're just showing other ways that you might be able to move data from a database, as that's our example. So the same logic applies here. We get data from a database, and this time we're only looking for data since the last connection. So that's what's getting passed into the next trigger. We update the trigger variable the variable that we're using with the current system time, and it's getting used in the next firing of that connection. So
yeah,
that should be, yeah.
From an industry perspective, right? I know we're all seeing that there are more and more applications that are being provided in the industry with those REST APIs, right? And the reason for this is we want to bridge the OT and IT divide, right? And we're constantly working through that. I know I've been to many events that is just constantly talking about that IT OT convergence, right? And that's what REST does. It supports the modern architecture. It's easier to manage. It's flexible, and it's future proofing. I see you guys talking about AI in the chat, right? And we're going to mention a little bit about that MCP server. I know Rod's going to reach out to a few of you here, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about future proofing, right? How are we out empowering AI, and can OPC Router help with that? And that's something to get excited about.
Yes. So at this point, we can go ahead and make all of these changes productive. So I just published the entirety of this component here. We can see that we're getting some executions already. And this will kind of just give us a view of our status tab where we can see that when something goes wrong, you can get some insight into why. You can see the history of the triggers, things like that. Just gives you a good idea of what's going on in your system if you ever need insight. And I think this should be about it for the demonstration. There's a few things we have here, so I can demonstrate the last few connections just by sending a request to our REST server.
Yeah, so this is Postman.
Yes. And here I have the same thing pulled up locally. This is the web management aspect. So this is a separate machine I'm just connecting to and seeing the same thing. So here I can see that this is triggered. And now if I want to do the MQTT aspect, we can see here I am getting data in HiveMQ. So you can see that we're getting the payloads that we're sending with those OPC UA tags. And then finally, I have this REST API connection that we're sending it to going every 5 minutes. But the beauty of testing is you can trigger it and see the logic execute whenever you need to. So here I can just make things happen and say, I want to track where exactly something might not be happening as expected. I can take a look at these items and figure out exactly what's going on. So it makes it a very powerful tool to use. And I can see here my REST client did go off and it sent us a response. And this was the payload in our response. So yeah.
Powerful, but doable. And that's
Doable.
the whole thing about this platform is it's powerful but doable. And it's, you know, as long as you know what you want your architecture flow to be, everything is easy peasy in here. So if Nicole, you want to stop sharing your screen, I know we're hitting about an hour here, Allie, but I did want to show some things to get some people excited about what's coming in the future, specific to OPC Router, and also specific to our company.
Absolutely. And then afterwards, if you want to just like explain, you know, how people can contact you guys.
Absolutely, that is a part of my, yeah. I got it. I'm ready for you. So let's get started here. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, good job, Nicole.
Here. Yeah. So like I see you guys mentioning in the chat, if you haven't heard yet, MCP, that's the Model Context Protocol. It is an open standard that provides contextual information to LLMs. So OPC Router can leverage its RESTful API capability to empower LLMs and AI agents to access that real-time industrial data source, which Nicole kind of showed you today. This means that you can expose your system to process data to AI tools like Claude, right? AI-powered decision-making on the plant floor is what's going to really move this industry forward. And if anybody listens to Wackel Reynolds, he says we're moving into the Industry 5, right? So that's one thing to get excited about. You can subscribe to our blog here, blogs.softwaretoolbox.com, to hear more about that. We're definitely going to be writing up a technical know-how. And those of you who want to know before then, feel free to reach out, which I'll provide that contact here soon. The next thing I want to mention is ProNoobs. So ProNoobs is a scalable IT/OT platform, and it empowers you to visualize, manipulate, edit, and manage multiple OPC router instances across your industrial system. ProNoobs actually is technically available. So if you want more information about that, you can reach out to us. We'll be able to get you up and running. And then the last thing is OT SCADACon. So Software Toolbox will be there, and we're going to be raffling off a 1-year OPC router learning subscription. So this is valued at over $5,000. All right, so you can win this and utilize OPC Router for an entire year. That comes with a little bit of support from us, and you'll get more information if you end up reading the raffle. So it's not just giving it to you and you're by yourself. So we'll definitely provide you with some training resources and things like that. So be on the lookout for my colleagues Tanya and John Gonzalez. They'll be there with Software Toolbox polos and some pins with the OPC router symbol and the OT SCADACon symbol. And the last thing is, if you cannot wait for OT SCADACon, or if you don't win the raffle, guess what? You can still play with OPC router yourself. So you can download the free trial. It will work for 2 hours at a time. That runtime service that Nicole was talking about, you just restart that. You can go ahead and start poking around. If you have some ideas, reach out. Solutions@softwaretoolbox.com. That's the team that I'm on. So you'll get to me and my colleagues, Ryan and Blake, or you can give us a phone call. We're known for answering the phone Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern. So for those of you who have seen the Office episode where they go and they're on a paper call and they prove that they can answer the phone, I can do that today. We're definitely known for that, and that's part of John Weber's dream of providing that knowledge and making it available to our customers. So, are there any questions before we move on?
I do see one from Jesus about danger. I'm thinking that might be related to accessing the configuration from a remote machine. Just to be clear, the only reason I was able to do that is because I'm using the same domain user account between the two machines. By default, the user that's installed OPC Router is added to that group that has permissions. You can also use something like Entra ID to set up permissions, or OPC Router has its own way that you can add users. So anybody else is not going to just be able to jump on and access it remotely like that, unless you're using the same user account that is on the machine that you installed it. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Nicole.
We also have a whole blog on security and OPC Router, so
Yes,
we can provide that.
We do.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you guys very much. This was a good episode. I'm gonna play the end of this, but thank you guys very much for coming on today.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
It's great.
Thanks for your time today.
And yeah, we'll see you on the next one, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.